Good morning, all, and welcome to the Grow Your People, Grow Your Farm webinar series and webinar number 3. I'm Olivia Weatherburn, the National Extension Program Manager, and today we have the privilege of looking at the third webinar topic on measuring confidence and competence. And we have the wonderful Lee Astridge from number 8 HR joining us, along with Charlie Duncan, farmer at Otiwhiti Station, who also trains a number of cadets as part of his role. So, just before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. On the line with us today, we also have Leslie Koppel from Beef and Lamb. She's going to be monitoring questions and the chat for you. She's just put a piece in there if you'd like to ask any questions but don't know how to use the piece of chat and want to send a text, you're more than welcome, and she'll add it to the question and answer piece for you. Otherwise, yeah, we encourage you to use the chat function, and where your engagement and some of your pieces of experience will be really valuable in regards to the discussion we have today. Today is being recorded, so it can be listened to after, and we'll be able to have those discussions for you to go back and have a look at. If you can try and keep your lines muted and your videos off, it's in the likes of rural broadband may kick us off otherwise, then we'll be able to ensure that everyone has a clear connection and can hear everything. So we've already had 2 sessions before now. The first session where Lee joined us and we went through different learning styles and understanding ourselves a little bit more. And then in our last module, we had the team from ITO where we looked at different training options. So, as part of today, Lee is going to do a little bit of recap of where we've been, and then we're going to dive into that measuring confidence and competency. So, I'm going to hand straight over to Lee to head us off and get on to today's session. So, welcome, Lee. Great to have you back.
Thanks, Olivia, and morena, everybody. I hope it's more pleasant where you are. And firstly, we're just going to recap the models in particular that we used in webinars 1 and 2. A good model is just a framework that you hang the common sense stuff that you already know onto, and it helps you in your head make sure that you're following all steps in a pathway. We can just talk briefly about what we mean by confidence and competence. So what do those words actually mean? And in the guts of today, we're talking about tools that help us measure confidence and competence post-training. And we're going to hear all these amazing insights from the work that Charlie does at Otiwhiti Station with all those trainees. And we're also going to ask you to help with the tools that you use. We're also going to look particularly at assessment tools and see if there's any that you guys might already be willing to share, and then we'll have a bit of a wrap up. Okay, well, let's kick on, and we'll do this brief little summary of what we did in webinar 1 firstly. So in webinar 1, the first model we looked at was the experiential learning cycle from Kolb, which is about do it, so experience the activity, think about and observe and reflect on what you've done, learn what you could do better, and then try it again. So what we know about adult learning is that it's really, really embedded in the experience of actually doing and applying as well. So that was the main message out of that model. And then we had a couple of learning styles and behavior preferences models. So we used the learning style VARC metaphor, no, it's not a metaphor, it's one of those ones. Anyway, you know what I mean, with visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and reading, writing. And then we heard from our farmer who talked about how he'd used the disc profiling tool really successfully in their business to make sure that the training was tailored specifically to the individual and how they like to learn. So a couple of learning styles, behavior styles that we know are really important when you're actually preparing and training for your trainees. Then in module 2, our friends Marianne and Caroline from Primary ITO introduced us to the Dreyfus model. So this is a model that helps identify the pathway that learners follow from novice. So if you look at the bottom of that scale of the horizontal axis. You can see we move from novice through to beginner, through to competent, through to proficient and expert. And we're going to come back to that model a lot today in terms of how do you actually measure confidence and competence along each of those steps. Next, we heard from, again, in our webinar 2, about how important it is to put a whole heap of effort into the preparation before the learning event. So this is the Binkerhoff model, and it talks about how you need to make sure that there's a whole heap of effort going in before the event to make sure that the event goes really well, and then after the event, what do you need to do in terms of to support that learning back in the workplace? So today's webinar, we're going to focus a whole heap on that after the learning event and how we actually assess competence and confidence. And then again, in that webinar 2, we were introduced to this model around how do you actually undertake the learning event. So step 1 is to explain to the trainee what you're doing. Step 2 is to demonstrate. Step 3 is to get them to imitate what you did so that they gain some confidence around actually doing it in exactly the same way. Then they get to practice, and then we get to evaluate the learning that's come out of it. And so the cycle goes around again. So once we've evaluated, understood where they're at, then we go back into explain again, so that we're creating this sort of upward spiral of learning as our trainees move through our businesses. So quick sort of recap there on what we were doing. And really, in terms of today, on that next slide, we talk about what do we mean by confidence and competence. So confidence is simply the belief that they can do it. So sometimes we see trainees who are overconfident and believe that they can do it before they've even seen you do it. And sometimes, and more often in my experience, we have underconfidence. So there's this lack of confidence and lack of belief that they can do it. So confidence is as important as competence, but confidence is born from competence. So unless somebody is competent, they will never have the confidence to do it. So when we're looking at these two dynamics, it's super important that the first one that we focus on is competence, because until they know how to do it, it's really unlikely that they will be confident in doing it. And if you've got somebody who's confident before they know, then you've got a whole different set of problems. And I'm sure Charlie's got some examples that he'll share with us on those as well. So let's kick into it then. And so just I said to you earlier, we're going to come back to this Dreyfus model that we looked at in module 2. And so what I just want to just focus on here is just those, the yellow line and the orange line through the middle of that. And what that's actually telling us is that when they're a novice or a beginner, they're really governed by the rules of the game. So if somebody feels like they don't know how to do something, it's super, super important that they know the rules that are attached to the task that they're doing. So if they don't have the rules, then they'll never, ever be confident or competent, because they'll just be swinging in the wind and trying to work it out as they go along. As somebody becomes more confident, the rules become less of something. If you subscribe to that theory of competent unconscious competence, so we're getting to that place where they've gone through that the curve of following the rules, knowing, understanding, and then they get to competent, and they're competent almost without having to think about it. And when they get to that point, they start to be able to read the context of the activity that they're doing. And that's when we move to this level of higher proficiency and expert. Today, we're going to spend most of our time in that novice, beginner, and competent area, because that's the area where we need to do the most checking to make sure that people can be confident and competent. So we're going to look at each of these levels just one by one. So I'm going to look at each of these levels, and then we're going to fire it over to Charlie and get him to give us some examples. So that Dreyfus level of novice, our learning aim at that level is that we want them to try and remember what they're doing. All right. So they're remembering the why and what they're doing. So that means that the learner at the end of this level, this novice level, will be able to recall the facts and basic concepts. So you'll see there in my right-hand column, we've got a little on-farm example around drafting lambs. So if they're at that novice level, they're watching another team member draft the lambs, they can identify what a ram and a ewe lamb look like, but they can't yet sort those lambs independently, and they still need step-by-step guidance. And there's no rule on how long that might take. So for some people, that will be a quick process. For others, that might be a much longer process. And if you remember what Marianne talked about in webinar 2, she talked about the difficulty if you sit on expert island. So you're somebody who's really, really expert at this job. And it can be very frustrating as you watch your novices come through and you think, come on, they should just get this by now. I've told them a few times, I've shown them a few times, they should be able to get it by now. If that's happening to you, then we need to think about the way that, we've considered how they're uptaking information and how much time it might take. And are we giving them enough reflection time? So that's sort of what's going on at that novice level. When we kick into that next level, which is beginner, what we're wanting them to understand at this point, sorry, that's the next slide, yeah. What we're wanting them to understand at this level is to understand the why in more detail. So the how and the why in more detail. So if they're competent at this level, it means that they can explain the ideas and concepts that are going on in the activity. So in our on-farm example, they might be able to start to draft the lambs with supervision. So they're starting to get hands-on. They can follow simple criteria, but they might need reminders and corrections as they go along. So, you're still kind of really standing shoulder to shoulder with them at this stage and helping them as they go through each of the task process. We get to the next level then, which is the dry facet level of competent. And at this point, what we're also aiming for is confident, right? So the confidence and competence to do it. So in our learning aims here are that they can apply the learning and they can regularly and readily and competently apply it over and over again. So that means that they can use information in use the information in a new situation, so they can be adaptable maybe between different yards or different processes. So are we drafting lambs? Are we drafting for another purpose, right? But in our example, what we're saying here is that at this level, they can draft lambs based on the clear criteria that you've given them, with confidence and minimal supervision, and they can explain exactly why the lambs are being drafted in that way. So those are our kind of 3 steps that we're looking for to get to that competent level. And we're going to go to Charlie now and ask Charlie to talk us through a little bit about what happens at Otiwhiti Station and how they navigate their trainees who are young adults. So we're not talking about school-based learning here, we're talking about adult learning. But these are young adults with almost no experience, aren't they, Charlie?
Yeah. Well, if you ask them, that's exactly right, Lee. But when they turn up, some of them know everything. They range from 17 to 19. And when we started 18 years ago, I remember writing down what we were going to teach these students in a year, and we filled up 2 A4s with all the stuff that we were going to teach them, and we pretty much took them into the training year, and we taught them the stuff we wanted to teach them, but there was so much stuff we never taught them, and the stuff that we probably did teach them, because we had such a large list of stuff we wanted to teach them, we didn't teach it well. So now we've simplified right back with a lot of consultation with our stakeholders, which is what referred to in education as people who employ our students. What skills they are actually concentrating on and what they would like us to make sure that our students have so that they're employable, and then what tasks they're prepared to take on to do their part of the training, which is in the next year away from us. And so basically for us, we now concentrate on 5 key parts for training, which is shearing, fencing, breaking and working a dog, riding a horse, and killing and cutting up a sheep. And it's an interesting choice. Lots of people ask us about the butchery and killing a sheep. And the reality is that a lot of places in the Napier Taihape area is that our students are the only students on farm out of 6 or 8 shepherds that can kill a sheep now. But it's suitable for human consumption. So most of those places are sending their sheep to a local trade butcher to get them done. So I guess, that's how our skills have come out, because they are our employers in that area. We're 18 years of what we've been doing, and 100% of our students have been employed since the day we started. That's tells me two things. There's an extreme demand for sheep and beef shepherds out there, and the second part is that there's a demand for well-trained ones that can ride a horse, and which is quite unique to our area in the Hunterville district, where we have class 7 and 8 hill country. So that's not for everyone, but also Gisborne and Tamaranui as well, where our students will end up. As Lee said, all humans are different, and when they come in, we get lots with confidence. And I just think back to this year, we had a young man there that came in and he was very, very confident that he could shear a sheep, crutch a sheep, do everything, but in actual fact he couldn't even set up a handpiece. But the bravado at the front end was only because there's 17 other people there, and he was just trying to fit in by saying that he could do stuff. But unfortunately for him, of course, when we started doing those skills, he couldn't do them, and so then he had to eat humble pie and go back to the start and learn how to do them. But is that kid any less behind than any of our other cadets? No, but it's identifying that confidence is one part and competent is another part. And for us, we like to train to our standard. And it's funny because here I am listening to what Lee's saying, and people ask me, what standard do you have in the workplace for where your students get to? And it's completely made up by us, but it's at a confident and competent standard in our view. And how does that sit for the likes of shearing? We want our students to be able to shear 100 sheep a day. That is our standard. And if it's one of our female students, which there is 10 this year and 8 boys, we have a standard of 80 sheep a day. And I guess that's so that they're not scared of the task that we're asking them to do, so that they can pick up a handpiece, set it up, run the sheep into the shed and shear a sheep, and they are confident and competent and not scared to do it. And that's the same for fencing. It's the same for breaking in and working their dog, and tacking up a horse and getting on it and riding it out in class 6, 7 and 8 hill country, killing a sheep in a timely fashion and dressing it out, and then being able to cut it up and bone out a full quarter. So that's how we do it in our part. We do have, they are all school leavers. They are young people leaving school. But our farming business is no different. We just layered a training business over the top of it, and we've done that for various reasons, which will be obvious to a lot of farming people. And that is, we didn't have any young people in our community, and we didn't have the young people that were turning up to our jobs. They were turning up with CVs the size of phone books with this DKO sign off, which is demonstrate knowledge of, from a trainer, which basically means they can't do anything because they've been shown 5 minutes earlier how to do the task. They do it in front of the trainer, and then that's it. They get signed off and they get their money as a trainer, and they move on. But you ask them to do that figure 8 or crutch that sheep again a week later, and none of them can remember how. So very important that when you're training, repetitive and regular repetitiveness is the key for our students learning. If we have tasks that they're struggling with, we'll bring them back into the station outside of our farmer partners, and they will have a week where they will kill every day for a week. And if they still haven't got it at the end of the week, we'll carry on for another week. So we will specifically pick the targets that our students are weak at and make them stronger at them by repetitively putting them back in, which is a bit like that table that Lee said, which was explain, demonstrate, imitate, and practice, and then evaluate again, which I read that and I sort of thought, oh, do we do that? And now I'm telling you we actually do it, but we didn't know about the table that says that. So, you know, it's how we got there, and we got there because most of our kids are coming from school and non-academics. They've not probably enjoyed school as much as some other kids enjoy school, and the teachers probably haven't enjoyed having them in their classes as much as some other students, and so they end up missing a lot of stuff that they shouldn't, but because they've been pushed out to Gateway and STAR courses where they're out of the class during English and Maths, but that's not their fault, and they just learn differently. So, you know, I think most people that end up in agriculture, I'd say probably 20% of our applicants will have some sort of dyslexia in a way. So good with their hands, good listening people, show them how to do something and they'll do it. But it's on a repetitive, regular basis that we do that.
That's great, Charlie. Thanks for that. I just had a couple of questions that I'd be really interested in. I think it was really interesting how you said the importance of defining the purpose of the training and kind of narrowing your focus rather than keeping it, you know, broad and expecting everything by sort of week 2. And I was super interested in your 80 sheep a day kind of shearing standard. But I was wondering what those standards are for the train the dog and the ride the horse. Like, how, you know, are they as crisp as that for those other competency areas?
Absolutely. So breaking in and working a dog. So about now, most of our students are getting the green light to get a hunt away. So they don't get that green light unless the heading dog that they came with. So we have an interview process for our students. So that will be done by the 10th of August, and we will notify the students that are coming to Otiwhiti for the following year that date, and we'll also ask them to get a pup, 6-week-old pup, and we send them a book called Pup Pen to Paddock by Lloyd Smith, which is an excellent step-by-step guide for training a working dog. We send them the book and say, do what the book says, ring us if you've got any problems, and I ring them probably every month and a half after that, just to see how they're getting on and where they're up to prior to coming to us. And so until they've got a good clean wallago and they're working on sides, they can take their dog to work and it doesn't bolt, then they're not allowed to get another dog, and they all want to get another dog. So there's a massive strive to get there. So that's the for the dog working and training. And for a horse, they have to be able to go and catch it, bring it to the stables in the dark, tack it up and be ready to go in 15 minutes.
Great. And how did you arrive at those standards? Like, were they a collective, you know, from your farmers and your cohort that are working with you, or did somebody just have the light bulb moment and go, that'll be it?
Yeah, the light bulb moment. So our management staff, which is, you know, we've had lots of people and input over the time, and we said, right, if we're sending a shepherd to the stables, you know, and the horses were there, because generally they're in the night before, you know, what's our expected time to say, turn up at the stables and we're ready to ride out. And so that's where the 15-minute came from.
Yeah, great. Okay, great examples. Thank you. Thanks very much. Are there any questions from the group before we could just sort of move on from Charlie? It's a super interesting environment you've got there, but any questions from the group before we move on at this point? There'll be more chances later, so this isn't your last chance.
Nothing in the chat at the moment, but if anyone's wants to raise their hand or take themselves off mute, please feel free to.
I was interested in the demographic ratio. So you've got more girls than boys this year?
Yes, second year, 2 years ago, we had 11 girls and 7 boys. Right now, any interest that we get, so our open day, I think it was 69% of the people that visited us were females. Sheep and beef business really, in New Zealand, they really have to acknowledge that women are in agriculture, and they are smart, they are clever. They don't come to us generally out of year 12. They'll stick it out to year 13. They're more mature, very much generalized, but you only have to give the instructions, a set of instructions once to the females, whereas often we will be repeating it to the 18-year-old boys. They're just different, and it hurts me to say that, Lee, but that's the truth.
Wow, I'm not going to say anything for fear of, for fear of getting any response wrong to that. But thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. There's been a couple of questions, I think. Is that right?
Yes. So how are skills recorded? Like, is it an Excel spreadsheet or training folder? How are we recording those skills and measuring of that confidence and competency?
Can I just get my next slide up, because I think this is
Yep.
where we start to we'll get into that. So when we think about what are the tools that we would use to measure, I just wanted to put this up and then Charlie, I'll get you to answer that question. But these are the kinds of things that on that journey from, learning goals from remember to apply, novice to competent, these are the sorts of tools that we would expect you to be using to make sure that you've got them right to that competent level. So just with that sort of slide in front of you, back to that question for you, Charlie.
So, I mean, obviously, 18 years later, we've evolved quite a bit, and we've also, I guess, we've been in the middle there with the demise of Taratahi and training times not perhaps being recorded as well as they could have. We got put through the ringer to a certain extent, not for the fact that we weren't delivering what we were supposed to be delivering, because we basically teach our cadets twice what we teach them in education credits in order to get them employed. So we were squeaky clean there, but where we probably fell down a bit outside of their diary was we didn't have any other way of monitoring how we were going. So 3 years ago, we developed a Google sheet that we send around with all our cadets. A part of our model is that we have 10 farmer partners. So 10 students are off farm each week, learning about other people's businesses, other people's management, and also they buy into our 5 key skills, pillar skills. And so because they're off farm, we don't know whether they've been operating a chainsaw or on an ATV or shearing or riding a horse. And so we wanted to be able to capture all that training inside a spreadsheet that came back to us for summary, because in about 2 weeks we're about to do mid assessments, which is where pretty much only for us, but we take all of the information out of the Google spreadsheet and we turn that around into how many hours they've been working in each area, and that's a good measure for our first read. And then the second part is that each Monday after school we go through those key pillar skills with our students on a rotational basis. So they finish school at 3 o'clock and we have 2 hours where they'll be killing, riding horses, dog training, shearing if we've got some shearing on the go, fencing, and so and if we're not killing, we'll be doing butchery. So we measure in amongst our own staff where they're at. So when we do come to our training logs, so the checklist is pretty much in our Google Sheets. That's got every skill that we want them to be confident and competent at. Then the training logs we get the hours that are derived from our sheets. And then we sit down as a senior management team, interview the cadet, and we also we ask them before that meeting to score themselves, so that we know. For us, I always tell our students to under promise and over deliver, but like the young man that came at the start of the year, the confidence thing, is difficult, and we don't know how they're going to convey that inside a job interview. So when we get rung, we can say from our mid-year, we can say, oh, well, we know that little Johnny thought he was super good at fencing and shearing, and he was good at riding horses and breaking in dogs. So we can just say to the employer when they ring us, look, he's pretty good at all of these things. His weakest points would be this, this, and this. And they'll go, oh, really? He didn't tell us that. But so I guess we use all of those tools even right through to when they go out to work. We also, for us, which is possibly not the same for other people, is we match our students personality-wise to our potential employers, because we don't want it to not work. The worst outcome for us from training to employment is the first job not work. It's the most important job they have after.
Yeah, great. There's a lot in everything you just said there, Charlie, but isn't it, I think it's really interesting to hear that almost through trial and error and innate knowledge yourself, you've ticked all of the boxes, if you like, in a sort of a kind of more academic framework for making sure that we achieve confidence and competence. Because as you were talking through, I'm kind of going, everything's there, right? Everything's there. Your kind of buddy peer sign off has been done on the farms outside. So, you know, they're not the formal assessors, but they're, you know, providing guidance and assessment along the way. You've got your final observation sign off, you've got your verbal check-ins, you're getting them to self-report, so you're tracking all of that. So yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay. If we just move on then, so what we're interested in understanding from you, and happy for you to either put this into the chat or for you to come turn your cameras on and come into the webinar with us, but interested in what examples you have around using these types of tools on your farm. Like, what do you use? What works for you? Really keen to hear what you've got to contribute here.
Cool. So Leslie's just put that question into the chat for everyone. And so I've just left it on this page so you can see which ones you may have examples of. I'm keen to hear what you guys are using.
Hi, Charlie. Gabby Harvey / Speedy here. Charlie, I used to work with Charlie.
Oh, there you go.
Yep, many moons ago. Yeah, I'm pretty inconsistent with it, but I try to get there. But we normally have monthly meetings, and we'll have goal setting for that month of what's ahead of us, and it's sort of goals for the farm and goals for them. But it's all written down in a format, but it is pretty casual.
Okay, so anything you think you might do differently, just having kind of listened to what Charlie's kind of, you know, the level of, I guess, more formality that Charlie's got going on there?
Yeah, no, I like that, and I like the sort of the checklist and the Excel spreadsheet would be very doable. So yeah, I think that's really good idea.
Yeah, great. And Valerie said conversation and definitely rate the self-confidence scales. Excellent. And David, you're using buddy peer sign off observations. And observation signs off. So that's great. One of the things that Charlie and I had quite a conversation about when we were kind of, you know, prepping for this webinar was this Google Sheets concept that that Charlie's got going. And one of the reasons that I really like that is that I think that level of understanding what people are spending their time on, whether they're trainees or not, can really help farm owners, farm managers really understand their opportunities for productivity in terms of, you know, productivity gains in terms of skill development. So, you know, if we know that somebody's taking, you know, I guess 3 hours to do a job that we would expect to take a couple of hours, then that opens the door for us to have that conversation. And it may not always be obvious from when you see them, because we don't always see everybody all the time on a sheep and beef farm or on any farm really. So I think, you know, getting students at Otiwhiti used to having to account for their time and for that being something that's important for their progress is actually something that we could carry on and we could adopt more widely across the sector to help us understand those training gaps.
Yes, I'll just add in there too, Lee. So with these checklists, we had the discussion as we were pulling these together of these different pieces that we are updating the Beef and Lamb Employment Hub at the moment, and we'll be looking at adding some of these pieces into there so that for those of you who don't have anything but want to use something, we'll be able to have a starting point to create something that works for you. So if you have anything that works really well and you're willing to share it and enable others to be able to benefit as well, you can flick us an email with what you've got, and we can alter it to be able to allow others to utilize it and add to the employment hub as well.
Great. Perfect. Now, the next question that I wanted to ask and get sort of some feedback from you guys, and Paul, I'm going to nominate you if nobody else actually says something, then you're going to be it. So what kinds of verbal checks have you found work best? Because quite often this is an area where we can struggle. So, it's hard to ask really good questions that can give you assurance that somebody's confident and competent to do the job. Quite often we'll say, are you feeling good about that? And they'll go, yep. And then, 2 weeks later we go, oh, they might have not been quite accurate there. So they were either feeling good and were misguided on their competence, or they weren't feeling good but just answered like that. So have we come across sort of some good tips really on verbal checks that work well to make sure that people are confident and competent when they get to that point?
Maybe while everyone's thinking, Charlie, what's been your key piece when it comes to verbal checks? Because I'm sure you've had that as well, and you've had so many different people come through.
Yeah. So I guess our verbal thing that happens is once a month. Every Monday we have senior management meetings, which is basically about setting up Monday afternoon and making sure that our rotation is working right. And everybody for example, if we have a weak horse rider, then they'll ride horses, more regularly and they're a strong killer, then they'll go killing, right? Everybody struggles in the dog training. So every Monday we set that up. We set up our week around that, and we also make that our health and safety chat with time as well. So our verbal checks happen on a week around all students, but not so much the ones that are achieving, or the ones that are struggling.
Mm-hmm. And when those students leave you and go out onto farm, is there a particular type of trainer or employer that they do really well with after they leave you? Like, is there particular qualities that you kind of go, our trainees are going to go really well with this is somebody who has this sort of quality around checking and discussion?
Not that I could be able to discuss, Lee. Sorry, no.
Okay.
I guess when we're placing them, we're placing them with good people who we know are going to look after them and nurture them. So what are those people? They're peers and friends inside the sheep and beef network. So I don't generally go too far outside of my own network and our farmer partner network to be able to employ our 18 students.
Yeah. Okay.
On the odd occasion where they've gone further afield to somebody who I don't know, because it's such a small sector, it's only a few phone calls to find out whether it's going to suit our students or not, to get a bit of background about the farmer that you don't know.
Paul, are you interested in joining? I appreciate I'm putting you on the spot, but
no, that's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we have got the GFF program running on this farm, and I end up with the year 2 students on my side, and so generally they are, they're competent at most tasks, and then I'll usually let them go away by themselves and do it, and I'll always check up the same day or within a couple of days, just make sure it's done right. And if it's not quite right, I'll take them back and just explain why things are done differently.
Great.
And we have like quarterly catch-ups with their trainer, and find out any areas they're weak at, stuff like that, to make sure we concentrate on that before they leave the course, obviously. But we've been pretty lucky. We've had good students, so yeah, there hasn't been too much of an issue.
Okay. Liv, can we just go back to the previous slide, just with the little icons on it? Because Paul, I'm in
to see what tasks they've been doing on farm, and it's quite good because that can go to their new employer as well. So the employer sees how many hours they've done at each different tasks.
Yeah.
But some students definitely do leave or graduate the course, and they're probably not up to scratch in certain areas. Yeah.
And so how is that recorded, Paul, or how do you tell them that, or how do they know that they're?
I guess it's up to each farm trainer individually.
Yeah.
But definitely on this farm, we do push, like Duncan was saying, we want our students to leave and be good, when they go to their next job. So we push what they haven't done. And you can pretty easily see on the farm what they're good at and what they're not. but I have heard horror stories through this course of people leaving and definitely not being up to scratch with a lot of things. Yeah, but I guess it's up to the tutors and stuff like that to try and get them up to scratch right at the end. But yeah, when the new employers ring up for a reference, you just hope that the farm trainers are honest and yeah, so they actually know what they're getting at the end of it.
Yeah.
Paul, I just got a quick. Oh, sorry, Lee.
Oh no, you go, Liv.
Just got a question for you there, Paul. You other than your GFF students, you have other staff on farm as well. How do you go about ensuring that they are in the right level of competency and confidence?
Yeah, so I've only actually I had one green shepherd that started, and I was pretty lucky with her. She was just the same sort of thing. You'd take her with you for a couple of weeks, and she was off a farm. So yeah, it's just personal opinion really of how good they are and what they can do.
Cool.
Liv, can you take us to slide 17 now? Because I think I'd like to get some answers in the chat on this one. So thinking back to a time when you thought someone was competent and confident, but they weren't, upon reflection, what more could you have done to check their competence or confidence before it went wrong? So this is kind of us sort of as a team kind of going into that experiential learning model and kind of going, what could I have done differently? So by way of example, in our business at Number 8 HR, we often find out when we're doing checks with the customer. So if we have somebody who's new to a task, then they'll work with the customer on that. But we make a point of going in and chatting to them, and we know chatting back with the customer and checking progress. And we know that if we don't do that, then we're more likely to get caught out with somebody who's not quite where we thought they were. Charlie, have you got an example to keep us going?
Oh, geez, Lee, I was just trying to think. I mean, we get it all the time, obviously, you know. But like I said to you, we drag them back in at lots of stages, and we have the ability, you know, because our business is now to specialise around that training part to make sure we don't fail on our key skills. You know, we identify obviously if they're weak at it ourselves, you know, whilst in task, and that can be weekly that we can identify that, and then we drag them back in. What we know around, you know, going back through what you were saying earlier, but for us, because we're practical people, it's just about more time in the seat, more time on the tools, more, you know, so the regular repetitiveness of that training is what brings them up to speed. And you know, some people would say to me that, you know, some kids just don't get it. And Paul was saying before, you know, he had a really green person, but they came off a farm. They're not green. You know, a really green person is, you know, 60 to 70% of our students come out of the city. They're urbanites. Now they're green. You know, they'll visibly stand in a high-vis jacket at the front of the drafting race, just hanging out there, happy as, not realising that that's not a really good place to hang out. You know, they just don't know. But most farm kids have a little bit of stock sense, and they know how to work and move around. So, yeah, I think, you know, the key for us is that if they're not succeeding at something that we need them to be competent at, we just put them back through and keep going, keep doing it with them until they get it. And it's all about getting it, you know, and sharing, fencing, dogs, killing. You know, they're not. Those four things are they're so complex. You know, you have to be a ballroom dancer whilst you're sharing, as well as know how to hold the sheep, as well as at the same time you've got a flamethrower in your hand, which is only getting hotter the longer it takes you to shear the sheep. So, you know, they're really complex tasks, but they get it. They get it. They just need time, and that's assessing. That's like all humans aren't the same, and it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and that goes nicely with what Valerie's put into the chat around spending more one-to-one time with them. So, Valerie, is there a story there you want to share?
Sorry, I'm not specific.
Okay.
But I definitely, as the manager, have often thought we're all busy, and it would have really benefited me to, and the person to actually go and just make an effort to spend more time with them one-on-one, I think it would have sped up improving skills and knowledge, and probably that trust that they need, that you believe in them.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that that's the crux of it, is the time investment required in our businesses to help these people gain the skills and knowledge is it's a kind of pay the punishment now in terms of the cost of time to get better productivity, better outcomes later on. And all the time, we're under pressure. The job's never finished, and it's about how you prioritize that time to get across that evaluation piece. Firstly, the training, the preparation for the training, then the training, and then the evaluation piece. So great, thank you for.
Lee, can I just jump in there, because you just hit a really important part, and it's something, like I said to you, our training business sits across a commercial farming business, and so one of the hardest things that we have with the people we work with in the business and managers, they're productivity driven. And so if you have a scale that has productivity here, training is here, they are both at opposite ends of the scale, because by time, and training takes time, so they're like opposite magnets. But what we try to do is get them as close to the middle that keeps your management staff happy, that they're getting productivity, and that comes back to I think we talked about this before too, but there's no such thing as can't. It's the first thing I tell my students. There's no such thing as can't. I can't do that. You can do that. We just have to give you the confidence for you to believe that you can do it. We have to create the environment that it's a can-do environment, not a I can't environment. And they can all do it. And at the end of the year, it's proof in the pudding, because they can all do it. But I guess time is the investment that people have to put into training. And that is the hardest thing for a productive person, to be able to stand back and allow the time it takes for a young person to fix a fence, for example, where a tree went through it. And I had our farm manager giving me an example at our Monday meeting 2 weeks ago, where our tree fell through the neighbour's fence. We went there to fix it, and he was there for 2 hours, and that was probably a 15-minute job for him. And he was so proud of the outcome that the 2 hours was irrelevant. It was part of ruining his productivity for the day, but not for that student. So that's an example of that. You just time is hard, and you also have to resource yourself better. And that's one of our learning things in 18 years, is the commercial business and the training business have to support each other in labour in order to get through it, because there's no fat in the training business to be able to support the private farming business, and vice versa. But we have to work together to try and make that scale come together so that everybody's happy. And if you teach a cadet to dig a post hole, on the first day he might dig 4 post holes, on the second day he might dig 15, and all of a sudden you'll dig your 30 and he'll dig 15, and all of a sudden productivity jump is there. But it's only because you invested well in the first place.
Yeah, great point. All right, time's moving on, so we'll just take a quick romp through the right-hand side of the Dreyfus scale now. So probably less relevant in terms of what we're doing day to day, but slide 18 there talks about that proficient level and the Dreyfus level. So this is past competent. So this is the level that people get to where they're able to analyze and evaluate. So they're able to draw connections along different ideas, argue and or justify a decision. So they're getting now to a point where they can really advise others and really start to make decisions about how tactically we should go about some of our work on the farm. So the example with the drafting lambs, at this stage, they'd be independently drafting the lambs across multiple criteria and adapting to the drafting conditions, and able to identify, edge cases, or, is it this or is it that, and adjust their judgments appropriately. when we start to talk about evaluation past this competent level, so we're starting to get into that proficient level, the evaluations become a lot more behavioural. So on that next slide, we've got some ideas of what these would be. So it might be, because they're proficient, you're not having to invest in that shoulder-to-shoulder time, and you're not necessarily there all of the time. But you could get video, you could ask them some scenario questions, and you could do that before you send them on the job. You're looking at their soft skills in terms of their ability to communicate with you and with others who are in the work environment. And there might be some complex quizzes or complex what ifs, that's a scenario, but some complex calculations and those sorts of things that you might be getting people to do once they hit that proficient level. And then when we get to expert, they're able to sort of create things for themselves. So they produce new or original works. So in our drafting lambs example, they'd be teaching others, they'd be able to read the animal's behavior and you know, spot an animal that's under pressure. They'll be able to spot patterns in terms of how this might impact on wider farm sort of decisions. So at that stage, they're definitely on expert island, and the kinds of things we'll be able to use them and see them doing, mentoring others, giving really good behavioural feedback to other people, and they'll be in that real advanced reasoning in terms of figuring things out and being able to make really good tactical decisions and helping us with strategic decisions on farm. So questions there. Otiwhiti, what do most of your students need when they leave you? So I'm believing that they're leaving you at the competent level. So I guess the question I'm asking is, to get into that sort of proficient and expert level, what would they need?
Right. I mean, there's lots of things that they need, Lee. The first thing is that, you know, they haven't done a lot of mustering and stock work, so that they're not. I wouldn't even say they're confident of that, but our employers know that, and they know that that's the journey they take them on. When you get to expert or proficient and expert, there's a different mindset, and I was just thinking about it when you were talking, and one of the things that we do at Otiwhiti is that we have they can earn and learn and come back for their second year to do level 4, and then 0.58 of a diploma for level 5, because we're not very good at psychology and stuff like that. We just concentrate on production papers, which are going to make them better farmers and make their employers more money. So we do 0.58 of a diploma, and I think that is the description of how many people come back to do that, and we've started doing that in the last probably 5 years, so 13 years prior to that, and so that's available to our students and any other farm managers in and around the district that want to upskill themselves. But most, I would say 95 or 8% of those doing level 5 have been our past students, and I think that is, in numbers wise, we've had, we're in our highest year this year of 9, and lowest year I think we had 3 in the last 5 years, and we've sat probably around 5 or 6. But if you take that out of the total students that we've trained in the 18 years, it's a very small percentage, and I think that is, there's a definite mindset when you get to expert, proficient and expert, that it's driven by the person as much as you know. Some people are happy once they get, you know, they would call themselves expert, but you know, or proficient, but expert is, you know, it definitely is a level above, and it's somebody with the drive and attitude that wants to take themselves to the top of being the best at what they do. Yeah. So great. I don't think it's not everybody's cup of tea, and lots of people are just happy being good farm managers and rolling through that level with good, confident, competent, expert skills, but or proficient, not to export standard. You know, that next standard is definitely a small percentage of people. Yeah. Cool. Okay, and then cool. And I just wonder if you can maybe start us off, and then other people can contribute into the chat. Top tips, so just maybe 2 or 3 top tips
from your point of view around how do you accelerate that journey in that novice to competent area? And actually, maybe we'll just get you to do novice to competent. So if you were to give kind of 3 top tips, Charlie, around if you're getting people from that novice up to competent and confident, what are the 3 things that you would go, these are the key absolute things that you need to make sure you're doing? I'm going to limit you to 3. I know there's probably about 30 you want to say.
Yeah, that's like how you give me so much notice, Lee.
Yeah, I know, good like that.
But the first thing would be not trying to do too much stuff, which I mentioned in the first part. So concentrate on the stuff that you really want them to learn, and make that narrow and focused. Repetitive, learn by doing, and repetitive. That's an absolute key for us. So when you learn by doing, they also feel like they get productivity confidence out of that, because learn by doing, they end up with a fence, they end up with shorn sheep, they end up with crouched sheep. They love that. They love to look out the back and go, there's an outcome there, and I've done that. It's really rewarding. What would be the third thing? They can do, can't do, environment, making sure that the attitude's right. And not accepting anything less in your environment, making sure that all of your team buy into that there is no such thing as can't. We're here to learn how to do it, and we all learned one day how to do that, and we were just as hopeless at doing it when we started, as you're having trouble right now. So we know all of those difficulties, so we can relate to them.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And then we've got a couple coming into the chat there. So David's saying, top tip, supervise novice, then letting them do more by themselves. Sorry, that just moved, but with checking up. So that's a great tip. Thank you. Leslie's saying, let them do it, teach them, and then observe, allow them to make some mistakes, because that's a learning process. That's great. Pete's saying, practical tasks, providing a safe space to go and have a go, and also the potential to fail. I'm sure that we all know that some of our biggest life learnings come when we fail. So often our job as when we're teaching people is to make sure that we've got the guardrails around health and safety in place, but that there's room for people to fail, and because from failure we learn ourselves, and we learn important messages. Valerie's coming, owning the mistake with and alongside them. Oh, I think if I had chocolate fish to give out, Valerie, that would be a definite chocolate fish moment. And Joe, that beautiful nugget, isn't it? Inspect what you expect. So if you have an expectation and you set an expectation, I want to come back to, the 80 lambs a day, 80 sheep a day, then you actually have to check that that's the standard that they've reached. If you just set it as a standard and then don't go back and check on it, as we know, Joe, then that doesn't work.
Lee, just a question to add into there on the checking in. So it can be seen, there's probably a fine line, and Charlie, you might be able to comment on this as well, but there's probably a fine line between doing checking in to the point where the relationship with you as a boss to your employee is, this person does not trust me. They're on my shoulder. They're micromanaging me. How do we ensure that we're not getting to that point, but enabling them to know that it's a support piece, not a check-in, you're trying to help them grow piece?
Yeah, so from my perspective, where I most often see this going wrong is that there's not really good discussion around what's happening. So it's about communicating, and so upfront saying, this is the process we're going to follow, this is why I'm going to follow this process, this is the standard, and making sure that all the way along the learner knows why you're going in and doing that. Because if you don't prepare them and you just say, right, I want you to set up a fence or shear some sheep, and I want you to do this many a day, but they don't know that you're going to check in, and they don't know that you're serious about the goal, then they'll be surprised by your presence, and they'll be surprised by the question. So let them know what is going to happen and what that whole process is going to look like. So that would be it's that communication piece. That's my piece. Charlie, what have you got?
Yeah, so I was nodding and agreeing with you, Lee. It's their environment. It's the culture and the environment that you create. No one would be threatened if you have the right culture. They'll know that you're there to help. And so, yeah, look, unless the environment and the culture is wrong, then I don't think you would have that problem. But
yeah, I think because you're in a training environment all the time, it's easier to create that culture with a group of trainees who are all on that same journey. I think on farm, we've just got one person learning a skill. Communication's hard, right? I always remember a tip one farmer said to me, and I've never forgotten it, and we were running a focus group on something, and he said, one of my golden rules is communicate 10 times more than you think you should, because whatever you think you're communicating, it's 10 times underneath what you actually need to do. So yeah, just another couple of really good, Katrina in the chat saying, making it so they aren't afraid to admit they've made a mistake or something is broken. Perfect. Pete, I like regular follow-up so they become expected rather than negative fixing experiences. Yeah, great contributions there. And so
Lee, just one other thing that I wrote down from the other day that I haven't mentioned, and you touched on it before. And you have to make mistakes to learn. You don't have to make mistakes, but making mistakes can help learning. And in a lot of our cases, we will, and this will sound bad, but it's not that bad, but we will set our students up to fail. Particularly around the dog, we'll set them up so that their dog's going to crash their head without a doubt, and then then when they see it, they understand it better to be able to fix it. And that's just one example, but we can put them against the fence and stop that happening the next time around, and then they get it. And so we always say to our students, it's not a mistake if you make it once, but if you make it twice, then it is a mistake.
Yeah, great. Okay, and so look, then team, by way of summary, if we look at our final slide here, before we get into the thank you for turning up slide, but here's all of those slides that I've taken you through from Dreyfus level novice through to expert, and what the learning aims are, what the learner can do, and then the on-farm example where we've used drafting lambs, and then what I've added on into that far right-hand column is just the kind of evaluations methods that you might use at any of those levels. I think the most critical one for us is that competence level, so competence and by implication confident. And so the best evaluation methods to use there are some kind of formal observation sign-off, so that the person knows and expects that that's going to happen, that there's some kind of verbal reasoning or questioning around what they've done, and you've got some kind of self-confidence scale from them that that they're feeling confident, or you can adjust their confidence level if it's not really calibrated with what their performance is actually showing you. So that, I guess, is the master, too complex to start with slide, but kind of sums it all up. So if I was to say to you that slide, and then back in the sorry, I'm just trying to find it, slide 15 it is, which has got those 6 suggested methods of assessment. Those are your guiding slides from this webinar in terms of thinking about how you evaluate your training, how you make sure that they're confident and competent, and that you can then continue to move on to the next thing. Because this is, as we've always talked about through this webinar series, a cyclical process where you're learning, trying, reviewing, incrementally improving, and then increasing your skill.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, team, for sharing with us your experiences, especially those of you that have joined and put some of those in the chat as well. That is much appreciated. And thank you very much to Charlie and Lee for sharing their insights as well. So that brings us to the end of webinar 3 of our series. We have one more of these to go. And that is going to be held in 2 weeks' time on the 11th of July, same time, same place. And that's where we're going to be joined by clinical psychologist Sarah Donaldson, where we're going to talk about the communication piece in a bit more depth, but really about how we work with different generations of people. So there's a whole lot of different scenarios out there that people can have struggles with or have some solutions with when it comes to actually working with different people. And it's just a lot of it is around the way that we have been communicating. So we're going to dive into that with Sarah and learn some of those gems off her. And so all of these webinars, as we have said, are being recorded. You can should have received, if you have been registered in your emails each week after following this, you get the recording sent out to you. If you haven't received that, please come back to us. But you will be able to also find that on our employment hub under continuous learning, so that they are all sitting there along with all the resources that the team and each one have been referred to. So you can go back and listen, click into those resources. So this one will be up early next week, and the other two are there if you want to go back and have a listen. So thank you very much everyone for joining, and we look forward to some of you joining us next in 2 weeks' time on the Friday the 11th, 11 a.m. for our final one of the series.